Hello. Today I'll be going over 5 of the most frequently asked questions that I get from people that want to enter into the short-term rental space. One of the biggest questions I get is, how do you know which market to choose? Like what kind of things do you look for? Really, the first thing I do to see what short-term rental market I like to invest in is usually go through a company called Airbnb. They publish a report, consider top 10 vacation rental markets in the US. And you just go through all of that. You go to the larger markets and you see, more or less how much, profitability be, what is the investability score, what are the laws like, things like that. Another thing is I just follow the experts, the people that are the realtors that are investing, like the short-term shop. It's the people that have properties in different areas and have specific numbers that they show me, and I'm just very intrigued. So that usually does it. And what I really look for is really a vacation rental market, something that has a drive-to destination. Usually those are more recession-proof. I really do like going somewhere where there's a big tourism pool. There's something, there that allows a lot of people to come. National parks is a good example of that. So that's really what I look for. Another question I get, question number 2, is how do you find your team? So one of the places that I look for team members, that could be their cleaner, mechanic, recommendations, things like that, is Facebook groups. Facebook groups are amazing. A lot of times you can figure out a Facebook group by just putting in Airbnb or short-term rental and then the city name or the market name. And that times you can find other investors that are in the area and you can ask them what their recommendations are. And sometimes there's cleaners in those groups, and really you can get a good feel for who you should use. Another thing is what I mentioned is other investors. Other investors have, a really good understanding of that market, especially if they have a couple properties, and they might be able to send somebody that, is already vetted and, knows that they'll do well. The third question that I get is, how do you finance short-term rental number 3 or number 4 or number 5? What I tell them is really it starts with number 1. Right? Don't think so far ahead. Get your first deal, get in the door, and then everything else kind of falls into place. You'll find the money for deal number 3, 4, or 5. If you do have number 1 or number 2 and you're struggling with that, that's a whole different story. What I like to do when I'm starting out is just to do the 10% down. You can actually do a vacation loan that allows you to get higher cash-on-cash returns on your deal, because it's considered a secondhand home. After you use the 10% down, if you want to invest in that same market, another option you could do is the 15% investment loan. It's another option that you could use. Something else that people do is also do the 10% loan in different markets. That's what I would recommend, just because you can get high cash-on-cash returns of being able to just get that property and make that cash back so you can reinvest into the next market and the next property. That's what I've seen is the best for scaling. Once you are out of cash, you really have to go into creative financing. So that could be a HELOC loan, which is essentially a loan against your primary residence. You could do partnership model where you bring a capital partner, somebody who has money, and you use your own experience to just run the operation and build equity that way. Another way you can do it is a DSCR loan, which is a loan that takes your investment income, so from rental properties, things like that, and applies it to be able to get a loan for a property. So that's something else you could do. Another question I get a lot is a series of questions. It's what I like to call the what if questions. The what if questions are really just a matter of, what if the cleaner doesn't show up? What if the guest damages something? What if, the house burns down? There's just so many things that can happen, and, people get down this rabbit hole of all of these what ifs. What I like to say is, with any kind of investment, there's always going to be risk at play. When you go outside, you can get hit by a coconut, right? And you could die. But the thing is, it's about mitigating risk. How do I take this investment and figure out what are the plays that I can do to mitigate my risk and allow me to operate in a less risk environment? So the first thing I recommend is insurance. It seems so easy, but the thing is, insurance, If you have fire insurance and a fire comes about, you are actually covered in that aspect. So I always tell people to get insurance, more specifically even short-term rental insurance. If you talk to your insurance broker, they'll be able to tell you more about that. Another thing I always tell people is your team. Really, once you have a trusted team, that takes a lot of risk out of it because they can always get there on time. They're always telling you what's happening. They're your eyes and ears. They're fixing stuff in a well-mannered way. Just everything. If anything goes wrong at your property, really your mechanic is there to help out as soon as they can, right? So all it takes is just calling the expert to be able to address that issue. A lot of times people think, wow, well, if the property's close by, I can always hop on over and help out. It's like, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna either fix the toilet if it's broken, or are you gonna just calm them down to make them feel better, right? Like at the end of the day, you know, I rather use my time on income producing activities, things that like growing my portfolio, and leave the other things to my team, right? So even if the property is, you know, right next door to me, I would operate it just as if it was 2,000 miles away. You know, it's the same thing. Because at the end of the day, your systems and your processes and your team is what makes the world go round and allows that rental to operate. And that actually goes into my next point is systems and operations, right? Having all your systems in line with your automation of, you know, the guidebook, allowing guests to know more or less what they can do in the property and the house manual and things like that. What I like to put in my properties is a Ring camera, which allows me to see what the people are doing, or if there's a big party coming about, and also like to put smart lock code that tells me when guests check in or when cleaners check in, or you know, can unlock a door if there's a malfunction. It's really useful to be able to have all these things, to be able to have that so you can actually feel at ease with all your what if questions. The fifth and final question that I get the most from beginner investors that want to get into short-term rental is, how do you determine profitability? And that's a great question. It's the big finale question because it's important, right? Like, is this going to make money? So I always like to say there's 3 important metrics that I like to look for when I analyze properties. One is occupancy, how percentage of time that the property is occupied throughout the year. The second one is average daily rate, which is also referred to as ADR. It's an excellent way to see the nightly rate throughout the year on average. So taking those two together, if you multiply those times 365, you get your gross revenue for the year, which makes the third metric that I would really look for. So let's say you find a property and you want to see how much money you could potentially make. What I like to do is actually go on AirDNA Rentalizer. If you have an account with them, which is totally free, you can actually go in and put the address of the property and it'll tell you more or less how much you'll earn. It's not always accurate just because, you know, it's by zip code and it's really general and there's so many factors that come in play, which is why I recommend using the enemy method. Enemy method has made the most sense in terms of determining profitability, getting the most accurate idea of how much your property is going to make, more or less. In general, has been my main driver for how I determine profitability in every market. So what enemy method is going on Airbnb and looking at all of the comparable properties in the area of the desired property you want to acquire, right? You take that and you go in and see, for instance, if it's 2-bed, 2-bath, you want to find other properties that are 2-bed, 2-bath, and properties that have not been managed by property managers, just because property managers might mismanage the property. But I would look for somebody that actually owns the property, has a lot of reviews, it's highly rated, things like that. And then see on average how much that property makes throughout the week, throughout the months, depending on the season, and just average a rate that's in between all of those different rates that you've put together. Then you actually come together with your ADR, your average daily rate. From there, you can actually determine occupancy depending on the market. AirDNA has some of this information. For Smoky Mountains market, it would be around 80%-ish. For conservative numbers, I like to use 70%. And then I run the ADR times the occupancy times how many days in a year, which comes out to your gross revenue for the year. So that's kind of how I like to look at things. Just a rule of thumb for your net after paying down mortgage and all your expenses, I like to shoot for 40% of your gross. And that's kind of how I determine more or less how much I'd make through the property. And there you have it. Those are the questions that I get when I talk to newbie investors that want to get into the short-term rental space. If you have any questions or want to make any comments, feel free to comment below on this video. I'd really appreciate it. This was actually pretty nerve-wracking to shoot just because I know how to talk in front of audiences, but I'm not always the best talking to the camera, I guess through the screen. It did take a lot of tries to put this together, and my team, I'd really appreciate if you could follow, like, subscribe. I'm hoping I can get better over time and deliver some quality videos to you guys and be able to provide a lot of value, honestly. Just want to make other people financially free, and that's the goal that I've always had. So I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you.